if I really want to make wealth for myself, I need to bet on myself. That's what today's guest, Juzbi Walia, told me when she explained why she walked away from corporate and into entrepreneurship. And honestly, I definitely felt the same, because if you've ever tried to sell something online without feeling like you need a shower afterward, then this episode is going to feel like a breath of fresh air. Juzbi is a conversion copywriter and email strategist who spent over a decade in the area of persuasion and influence. And she's done it with big global agencies all the way through to major organizations and startups. And now she brings that skill into the online business world, helping course creators launch with integrity and clarity. And she's especially passionate about marketing that gets results without the bro marketing slime. And in this conversation, I'm chatting with Juzbi about how to use persuasion triggers that sell without being sleazy or manipulative, why customer research is the real secret sauce, and why, quote, copy is assembled, not written. We also talked about the difference between writing words and stepping into the strategist role that helps a launch actually convert, and how to handle objections without over-explaining or over-justifying or accidentally talking people out of buying. Welcome to the Online Business Launchpad podcast. I'm Trudy Rankin, and I help people who need a flexible work-from-home option start and grow their business so they can earn more, stress less, and have greater freedom in how they live. And today, I've got Juzbi Walia with me. And Juzbi is a conversion copywriter and an email strategist. And when I had a bit of a chat with her, we had a little bit of a glitch. We've already chatted once. And of course, I turned off the record button instead of on. So we are having a second crack at it. So Juzbi, I'm really glad that you're able to come back and that we're able to talk about the things that you have a lot of knowledge about.
I'm really happy to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, so one of the things that when I was first looking at what you might be able to talk about, one of the things that jumped out at me was the fact that you were interested in talking about when somebody's trying to launch something, being able to use non-sleazy persuasion triggers. Now, most of us have, for our listeners out there, most of you have all sort of experienced all of that bro marketing sort of stuff where you read what they've got to say or you listen to what they have to say and it all sounds amazing and wonderful and everything, but you still get left with this slimy feel at the end of it. And so I'm looking forward to chatting about what that looks like. But before we get into that, could you just share with our listeners a little bit about you and just how you got to where you do what you do today?
Sure. So I've been in the business of persuasion and influence for over a decade. I spent nearly a decade in corporate communications, working with some of the biggest global agencies, Edelman, Ogilvy, those who are in the PR world would know, and also serving clients that ranged from a sovereign wealth fund in Abu Dhabi to Canada's largest sector employer, to a startup tech, which today is a unicorn in Dubai, doing PR for them. So I've had a wide range of clients working across different sectors, but doing what I do, which is persuading stakeholders, media to understand the narratives of the brands that I was serving and buy into it and promote it, whether it's landing a media pitch in an overcrowded inbox of a journalist or delivering a CEO's speech or a mayor's speech for that matter for City of Guelph mayor in Canada to influence the public about a certain decision that the city municipality has taken. So it really was a wide range of activities and tasks and projects that I was doing across all these places in the last 10 years. But also the underlying theme was always, how do I influence and persuade the stakeholders in front of me, right? Whether it's media or investors or public or even internal stakeholders, like the different departments that you need to work with. So corporate communication allows you to do a lot of fun things. And it really sharpens your skill in the art of persuasion. You, a lot of times early in your career, you do all the wrong things and you learn through your lived experience what to do, what not to do. So it's a great industry, but I always had a burning passion for entrepreneurship. In fact, I did, get into entrepreneurship, I would say from 2019 to 2021, when I only taught yoga for 3 years. Today, I teach yoga as a side hustle. And I've been doing that since 3, 4 years now, teaching on the side. And I wanted to use all the knowledge that I've gained in all these years of working in the corporate and leverage that and also upskill myself in the highly specialized field of conversion copywriting and email marketing. So there was a steep learning curve because it's extremely specialized. It's a different market. But I really got into it and I immersed myself in this world and learned it and delivered results for a client of mine and did some other interesting projects, like ghost wrote a project for another client who's based in New York. And all this I could do because of my background in influence and persuasion. And yeah, I just absolutely love what I do. And that's why I'm here today doing this work.
So what was the trigger point for you from making the leap from corporate into your own business?
I think if I have to be brutally honest, Rudy, I just thought that if I really want to make wealth for myself, I need to bet on myself. Like I will, I consider myself very ambitious. I looked at the corporate world and I said, I'll get my promotions like this in a steady pace if I do all the things right. And that also is not granted. Unfortunately, I've had a lot of contract jobs. So I've been contracted for a project that's lasted over a year. That's why I have a wide ranging experience. And then I would move to another contract, all top companies. But corporate always gives, I would say, loyalty is obviously really important, especially now more than ever. So it always rewards people who've been there for 10 years, 7 years, 11 years. So I thought to myself that this is not an advantageous situation for me. And I really want to bet on myself because I feel that I would be able to become a lot more wealthy if I do that. I can create opportunities for myself far more than any job can give me. By the way, it's still early days, so I'll test it out how that looks like and whether my hypothesis was, right or wrong. But I do believe that, and being my own boss and taking my own decision is very exhilarating. I know for a fact that I'm someone who has always loved freedom. And now it's more about I've done the grunt work of spending 11, 12 hours in a corporate setting, which is the nature of the beast, especially as you're in your younger days. But now I thought to myself, okay, how can I design my work that serves my life, which I think a lot of people talk about, right? It's not just me. But for me, it was, okay, I want to be doing what I love. There are many ways of making money in the world. There are 10 business ideas I can tell you right now, which I know will work way better, right? But I've always been a heart-led entrepreneur. It's not about just being able to pay the bills. It's like, what do I do in those 8 hours? That needs to intoxicate me, which, by the way, a lot of my friends and cousins and what have you don't understand because they are very, they don't think like me. And there are not that many people, I suppose, who are this passion led. And maybe it's also a privilege to be able to do that. So I think it was about, I want to do something I'm genuinely passionate about that really fulfills me. And then as a byproduct, it gives me money and wealth, etc. Second, it needs to be completely under my control, like in terms of having the freedom to take off when I want to structure my days the way I want to say yes or no to clients the way I want to. Granted, it requires a high level of self-directedness, but you know what? You lose some and you get some. So yeah.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting because, especially what you're saying about family and friends not always understanding. They're going, why don't you just go get a job? And they can't understand why that's the last thing that you want to do because it seems risky. It seems risky to some people. And in some senses it is. But also if you can back yourself and know that you're going to do what it takes, it can actually really, really work. Especially these days, lots of people are so worried about AI, and we'll get into AI later, but so many people are worried about AI, and it's just like, hang on, you've got to be able to use these things as tools and make sure you stay ahead of the curve rather than just knowing that something's going to come along and eventually eat your corporate job for lunch. I have a question for you because you've mentioned persuasion and influence, which is what conversion copywriters do. That's the focus. That's the hallmark of success, if you like, is how many people are persuaded and influenced. But I'm curious because once again, I've got a background in corporate myself. And one of the things that I found fascinating and sometimes difficult was being able to persuade people higher up the rank about specific ideas or taking a specific tack towards something or doing specific projects and being able to speak in the language that they recognize. So I'm curious, when it comes to copywriting, conversion copywriting now, do you find that being able to influence and persuade via your words is different or not different to when you were doing it in a corporate environment or whether you're doing it for the clients of your clients?
So there are a lot of similarities. Obviously, there is difference, but a lot of similarities too. For instance, you spoke about how finding it difficult sometimes to influence people higher up in the corporate. So to that, I would say that I will draw parallels to what it is like in the online world too. To that, I would say that I would always look at people who could be on my side. So if there was a policy or the idea that I wanted to sort of promote and get a greenlit for, I would look at who are the people who can be my advocate. Because sometimes the idea coming from me may not be the right thing. It's not only just the idea that goes out, it's also who is speaking of that idea. What is the perception? Is that person too junior? Has that person not been able to be visible and noticeable among senior leadership because they're too new in the business? Or whatever it may be. So who's delivering that idea? It may be yours, and you may get the project, right? That's what you want, the main outcome. So you still get the outcome, but how do you go about getting that influence? So you look at the people around you who can back you up, who can be your advocates. You may consider not being you the person who voices that idea out, but eventually gets that project. And similarly, in the online space, people do a lot of collaboration. So suddenly, if I'm writing for a very huge, Maria Folio or what have you, right? If I'm writing for them, suddenly I'm in the league of 6, 7, 8 revenue figure online course creators. And people just look at me differently. So who do you partner with, right? When we do testimonials, which is such a huge trust signal asset that online course creators rely on during their launch emails, who do you put in the testimonials? If you have people who are extremely successful in the stuff that they're doing, which is related to your course, right? And then you Google those people, you're like, wow, these guys are amazing. You suddenly feel that online course creators knows what they're doing. It's about who you connect with, who you know, who's advocating for you. So that is a similarity, I would say, between both the worlds. And it's really about, like I said, looking at all your experience, lived experience, and translating it and seeing connections in the work that you're doing now.
Yeah, I think that's always interesting because it's actually an important thing that a lot of people don't think about, and that is that whole collaboration space and the many, many opportunities there are to work with other people. And, even if you're using I use the term borrowed authority, but just working with people who do have that standing and your audience recognizes them and trusts those people, which is always really, really helpful. Pardon me, I'm curious. Because my understanding is, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is that you work a lot with people who are course creators and who are ready to launch their courses, and you help them do that effectively and successfully. What would be one of the things that they would need to be paying a lot of attention to when it comes to thinking about how they're going to address objections in their copy? Because, one of the key fundamentals of putting something out for sale is understanding people's objections and addressing them. What would be one of the things that would be the most important to think about for somebody who's a course creator and getting ready to launch?
What I've seen people get wrong is that they don't really know the objections well. They think that this is the objection, and so they address it because that's the obvious thing that comes to them. It's a lot of times the objection could be the price, or it could be the time. They don't have the time, and quite honestly, you can't really address them do well. If somebody finds you expensive, they find you expensive. They may genuinely won't have that money to spend on a certain course or it's not maybe urgent for them. And there's nothing you can really do about that. And those who really genuinely understand the value of your course because you've clearly communicated it to them and it is your top level priority more than anything else, then money will never be a problem. They know that it's something they really need to solve and they want to go for the top notch course out there. Money aside, fees aside, I would say a lot of people don't invest time in customer research. So when they hire a copywriter, that's 80% of what a copywriter does is the customer research. The rest of it, writing copy, is 20-30% of the work because copy is assembled, not written. That's what happens in conversion copywriting space. And so you're not injecting a modality within your strategy to know how to get answers to the objections. A lot of people use the same objections people had 2 years ago or 3 years ago of the same online course, but the market has shifted. Your course structure may have shifted. So they just don't. So this is the number one thing I would say. They don't know the right objection to answer to. And the second is, if they do know, there's something called over-persuasion. And that, I think, goes beyond just the objection, addressing objection. It goes, I would say, that runs across the entire copy you write for your launch emails. When there is over-persuasion, people kind of see it. And sometimes they don't, because manipulation is something that really works, right? If you can do it subtly, but it never benefits the course creator in the long run because people get seduced by your amazing copy because you've over-persuaded, whether it's addressing objections or anything else in your copy. They get into the course, they burn their fingers because either they don't have the time to follow through or it wasn't the right fit for them. You don't have any success stories on the back of your course taker's work. And then when you're promoting it next year, you're still running 2021 testimonials or 2022 testimonials. So it benefits no one, So there is something to be said about the cost of over-persuasion and how it's prevalent in the online industry, and really need to watch out for every word that you're saying should really be genuinely helpful. You should look at it that way, genuinely helpful for the person that there is.
That's a really interesting take on that. In terms of the over-persuasion, I'm just, like I said, once again, coming back to the whole bro marketing thing. It sort of feels like that's what they're doing. They're overselling, over-persuading, making what feels like almost false claims because 99.99% of the people who want to be able to do what they're selling wouldn't have what they need to be able to be successful. That's kind of interesting. I'm a little bit curious, coming back to the whole concept of objections and doing the research to discover what those objections are. What are the ways that you do your research for the people that you work with?
It is an extensive process, but it's absolutely crucial to crack the strategy. I interview past participants, whoever can come on a Zoom call. I have a bunch of questions that really goes deeper into their desires. Like you break it down, why, and then it goes to the core of it. And sometimes they don't know themselves, and they actually discover it during the call. So a lot of time that happens too. I do online research, Amazon, reviews. Reddit is a great source. And I also use a GPT bot where I feed all the research, and it gives me a bit more of nuance in terms of it does its own research, pulling things from the online space and giving me even more sources to look at or even more ideas to look at. That's a bot that I use for also going back and forth to refine my offer message and offer positioning for the client I'm working for. And what I'm mainly looking in my research is a sense of patterns. What is the hierarchy of messages? What is the most important, deepest desire or most important outcome that they want? Where are they getting stuck? Where is the objection? And what is the hierarchy of messaging angles that are like secondary to the main must-know message or the main sales argument? And why are they in a certain level of hierarchy? So my research tells me all this.
That's a little bit interesting. So a couple of questions. The first one is, can you just talk a little bit more about that whole concept of a secondary hierarchy? And what do you mean? And can you give an example?
Sure. So for example, if I'll just pull it out straight from a specific example, which give me a second. So for example, I had this person that I did like messaging work for. She's a social media strategist, Instagram strategist. And, she had a bunch of benefits, right? Like why people should join her Instagram sales course. And it's rooted in timeless marketing principles. It is, it'll make you write content at a much faster pace. It'll be easier for you to create it. There's a methodology, there's a system so that you don't burn out just constantly writing. I'll also teach you hidden strategies where it's not about just constantly posting and being on a hamster wheel on Instagram, but posting very less, but making it work exceptionally well for you and doing other things on Instagram like engagement that'll work. So all the hidden strategies where you're saving time by not posting. She spoke about adding fun to the whole thing because people are jaded. They're like, oh, what is happening, etc., etc. Spoke about confidence building, how you will know that you'll be able to generate repeatable sales without second guessing your marketing efforts. So she spoke of all of this. And while she was consistent about these messages on her sales page, on her email launch copy, on her webinar invites, what she was missing once I diagnosed was a singular definition, the sales argument, which is what I feel a lot of course creators miss. What is that one thing that is unique about your course that makes you stand out from the rest of the other offers? Or what is like your pet peeve, or for a lack of a better word, which is ironical because I'm a copywriter, but what makes you angry about the state of the affairs in your industry that you want to go at it for, something that feels like an injustice, right? So a sales argument is always rooted in your unique perspective or something that you're offering and bringing to the table in the same industry that no one can really copy, or a point of view which is very distinct. Right? It doesn't start with just benefits that this will make you do A, B, C, D, E, which is how people start with. So when I did the research, I realized that, what she was missing, for instance, was that the main real problem, yes, was all these things that people were feeling jaded. They were burning out from constantly trying to post content. They're not seeing the algorithm doing their work, and the algorithm keeps changing. 100% all of this were the problem. But the main problem was that Instagram felt unpredictable and draining, like I already said, for their audience, and they no longer trusted themselves to make it work. Now, this comes from the research. If I didn't know that, I cannot address it, right? And so it was about really talking about what is the solution. It was, what is she going to then offer that speaks to that main issue, which is a timeless marketing principle-based content system that clarifies why content works. And the big idea was that you learn how to generate repeatable sales from Instagram without second guessing your efforts, because it'll be about timeless marketing, right? So suddenly you're just delivering the main concern that they have, the number one concern they have, through the research. And when it comes to answering your question, when it comes to second, I needed to set the context by talking about this. I'm answering your question about the secondary messaging. Again, there is a framework that I use that allows me to, and I use the ChatGPT bot also to analyze what are the most important influence building messaging angles for a high converting copy. So I put all my one idea, one problem, one solution, the outcome they want, objections. I write the angles that I have, and the bot tells me which one will work. So I give the bot everything, because it's customized, right? It's trained. I give the bot everything about my client's audience profile, the whole thing, right? And so through the back and forth, it tells me what the messaging angles is. And that helps me not to test it out too much. There's always a reasoning, there's always, and this is again coming from customer research. You'll know exactly whether it's fun, wanting fun, back into the gram, confidence, whatever their desires are through this course. You will know through research what is coming up, what are the patterns, what is constantly coming up again and again. And then in your emails and your sales copy, you know how to address them in what hierarchy. What are you going to write in your last sales copy, the final call before the course is? Are you going to address the last thing that's a desire, or are they going to address the number one thing? If you don't have that kind of a document, then you're just sort of, leaving a lot of money on the table and not being able to do sold out launches because the strategy is not fully there.
I think that's interesting. And you mentioned a couple of times that you've got a GPT bot that you use to help with a lot of this. I'm just curious because I'm deeply into GPTs as well. And did you get access to that from somebody, or did you build it yourself?
I got it from this conversion copywriter called Danny Page. She teaches a lot of people like me how to step into the strategist role. And she is something I bought back in Q4 of 2025. And it's been outstanding for my business.
It sounds like it would be really, really useful because a lot of the effort or the brain work that has to be done is all around trying to fit your head around that whole thing about your audience. What are they worried about? What are they scared about? What all the research that goes into understanding their dreams and desires and everything. And it's interesting that you're able to put all that into what is essentially a pattern recognition machine and come back with stuff that's actually really, really super useful. Really, really useful. So that's quite interesting. So what made you decide that you were going to focus mostly on course creators who are ready to launch?
I love the online course creation space. And before I get into it, I also would say I'm going to be also approaching SaaS and e-commerce industries. Eventually, I will niche down. But like I said, I'm early in my business. So I want to cast a wide net. And I genuinely love SaaS and e-commerce. There's a lot of opportunities out there. So I'm just going to go ahead and do that too. But a reason I started with online course creation and a lot of my marketing is around that world is because I have an unfair advantage of being someone who has been taking courses for I think 6-7 years now. It has really helped me upskill in every aspect of my life. I've taken courses for corporate communication while I was there. I have taken courses on personal development, you name it, and I've done. And I always do the top ones because then I know that I'm in good hands. So I have been able to experience the course creation world from the other side, being a consumer, also burned my hands with some courses which didn't deliver. And there are many courses out there where they just overcomplicate something that's simple. They'll have gazillion modules on mindset and breathwork, and they just, to make it a bigger high ticket offer, they'll just overcomplicate it with all the stuff when it could be just simple. So I've seen what doesn't work and what works. I've seen being a content creator and writer for so long, I can observe from a vantage point the blind spots that the industry is having. And therefore, I felt I'm very equipped to serve this industry and help people sell courses. I really have benefited from this world. And I also see a lot of murk, which I feel, unfortunately, spoils the reputation of the entire industry, right? So I want to use my skills to be able to help course creators really up-level themselves and do marketing with integrity and achieve success. And I really feel passionate about it.
I've got a question for you that's, I guess, focused on another audience that I work with, and that's freelance writers. And one of the things that a lot of freelance writers are really worried about is the fact that, AI is there, and for a lot of them, they've had a really tough year last year, and it's been hard to For a lot of people, not all of them, but for a lot of people, it's been hard to maintain the consistency of income or the level of income that they might have appreciated before. And so I'm just curious if somebody was at the place where they're a writer or they're good with words. Let's just say that they're good with words and they're wanting to make a living from their words. Would you recommend that they get into conversion copywriting? And well, I'll ask that first. Would you recommend that they get into conversion copywriting?
I would say the truth is, I don't know, because I'm also figuring it out. I started this business last year. I am of the belief that it really is a very lucrative market. And the reason I say that is because I have had a lot of conversations with both the buy side and the sell side. So service providers like me, industry colleagues who are doing really well and having great launches themselves in terms of client work, etc. So they're still doing great work. And I've also spoken from the buy side of things, course creators who are hiring people like me. And my customer research has said that 7 out of 10 course creators value having copywriters in their world. A lot of them don't have right now because they consider this as a high value task themselves. Sometimes, they are podcasters like you and YouTubers. So it's a mixed bag. But my assessment of the industry based on my research and also the current work that I'm doing with my clients and knowing how the value that I'm adding, that's more than words in so many different areas that we can get into. It's just beyond writing words, and people who see that, the way you position yourself, if you can position yourself as a strategist who's a core decision maker and has a skin in the game when it comes to profitability of a launch, then you will always find demand for your work because people want to work with excellent people like themselves who get it. If they know that your work is directly related to getting sales for them, they will be convinced. It's just now about up-leveling your game. So the copywriters who are selling copywriting work as a commoditized product, selling for certain deliverables like 10 emails, 5 emails, and this is the money I'll charge for this amount of work, are going to find it hard to sustain. But those who are stepping into a strategist role, co-leading the launches and guiding the course creator with their leadership to understand where the blind spots are, because that's the thing, right? Experience does not eliminate blind spots. You could be the best of the best of the best course creators, but experience cannot eliminate blind spots. So if you can come in, have a big picture view, even if you're doing, let's say, just Facebook ad, right? Even if you're just doing sales copy as you start out, but do you have a big picture view of the entire launch? Can you have a point of view on their pricing strategy, on their positioning? Is there like a framework that you have to ensure there is a consistency of messaging across all the launch assets, be it socials and sales page, what have you? If you're able to provide all of that under the title of conversion copywriter, that's where you're going to really thrive. That's my experience. But if you are just delivering XYZ as a commodity and selling words as a service, that era is gone.
Yeah, no, I think that's really, really valid. And besides, the strategy part is the part that's, personally, I think that's the fun part, but it's also the most valuable to people who as you said, they don't know the blind spots. They don't have time to look for the blind spots, and they wouldn't have time to fill the blind spots once they knew they were there. It's been really interesting speaking with you. I do have one more quick curiosity question, and it doesn't have to be a massively long answer, but given the work that you do, what is your main, I'll call it a flywheel, if you want to call it that, for finding clients? So do you have a flywheel, and what does it look like in general?
I'm still testing it out. I don't have my lead gen strategy nailed yet. It's in that phase where I'm casting a wide net, I'm putting spaghetti on the wall, but I'm happy to share what I'm thinking of now. The reason why I said that, while I've kind of niched down on the online course creation space, I'm now looking at casting a wider net and approaching SaaS and e-commerce and upskilling there too, is because I hear a lot in the online space industry that niche down, XYZ, but sometimes niche doesn't come by arriving at a niche. There'll be enough course creators who are going to offer you courses as copywriters to niche down on XYZ. But like sometimes you just need to cast a wide net, put spaghetti on the wall, and then through that, you find your niche when you get your first anchor client, and then you get your second and your third, right? Like right now, I'm also doing work on podcast pitching for a client, which is not like email launches for online course creators. But you know what? I enjoy it. And frankly saying, it helps me pay my bills. So why not, right? So what I've decided is to leverage some of my in-person contacts, people who I know in the SaaS industry who are CMOs or senior leadership, and come and approach them because I have second degree of connection or third degree of connection with them, sometimes even first. And that's better to do so than sometimes cold pitching to online course creators, because I live in India. My clients are in the US and Canada, where I lived earlier. And then cold pitching has also worked. It's more of a difficult approach in the sense it's time consuming, not necessarily difficult. It's time consuming, because what I do is I take the guerrilla approach. I actually give them value first off. If I see they can tweak their webinar, free workshop invites or sales copy or sales page, I give them a high level reframe, what they should do instead and why. And sometimes I come back with like impressive work. I've been able to convert one person like that, but it takes a lot of time. But what I found the best is what you said, borrowed authority. So that's another thing that I'm testing. I really believe in creating high ticket offers and using other people's audiences who are also very appreciative of taking your stuff, because they don't have to create content all the time. They can just also use somebody else's content, which is also very valuable for their audience. So I'm trying to, and referrals have worked for me really well. Like I landed a really good project last year, like I was telling you about, where I ghost wrote an entire course for a physiotherapist. And that came straight from my existing client of 3 years. Referrals, it is putting myself everywhere and then finally cracking my lead gen strategy. So I'm doing everything right now. But I just wanted to be fully transparent that business building takes time. And one thing that I realized, the main thing I've realized in this journey is that ultimately you have to think for yourself. No business coach, no other person advising can really tell you what to do. It's not that prescriptive. And I had to unlearn a lot of things I learned from online coaches and realize actually that doesn't work for me for XYZ reason. So that's been my biggest learning in this business building journey.
I think that's really important to acknowledge that. Like I keep telling my clients, you have to start from zero. It doesn't matter how experienced you are or how old you are or what you've been through. When you start something new, you have to start from zero. And you might be able to learn a bit faster because of your experience, but you still got to go through that whole washing machine churn of trying it. Does it work? Does it not work? Or you call it spaghetti on the wall. It's really, really real. And just giving yourself the grace to take the time to do that and to do it really well. And I think that's really good advice that you've shared for people who are thinking about doing what you're doing, or maybe they are doing what you're doing and they're still scratching their head and going, why is this not doing what I thought it was going to do? So you've got to take the time to do that. So Juzbi, it's been just really, really fantastic talking with you. If people were interested in either getting in touch with you, maybe they would just want to get to know you better, or maybe they would like your help, where would they go?
I have an Instagram account called juzbi.copy. So you can follow me there. You can reach out for me on DMs. I haven't put a website yet because my priorities are laser focused on getting more and more clients. And so I'm just going to keep my visibility there. But if I do have a free resource for your audience in case they would love that, it's called How to Write Non-Manipulative Emails That Sell. And they can plug 15 non-sleazy persuasion triggers in their sales email copy when they're launching a course. And it's a checklist of all those triggers to make sure that you've covered all these triggers in your launch sales email. Because who knows which trigger make somebody say, okay, I'm ready to sign up now. And mine could be different from yours. So you want to cover all the ground. So that's a resource they can get in case they're launching a course and they want to revise their copy.
No, that's fantastic. I'll make sure I put a link to that in the show notes. I'm sure that people will find it really, really, really useful. Once again, thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. This was a great chat. I really appreciate it.
Second time around. And I really appreciate your patience. Okay.
All right.
Well, that was a good chat, and I hope it gave you permission to sell in a way that feels like you. Now, my biggest takeaway from Juzbi is this: you don't need louder marketing, you need clearer marketing, the kind that's rooted in what your audience actually wants, what they're worried about, and then what's stopping them from taking action, not what you think they're worried about. So if you enjoyed this episode, a couple of quick things before you go. Subscribe to the Online Business Launchpad podcast so you don't miss the next one. And if you got 30 seconds, please leave a review. It helps more people find the show, and it tells me what you want more of, which is extremely useful and honestly kind of mildly addictive. And finally, if you are building up your business and you want regular practical tips minus the fluff, I've got a newsletter for you. So head over to onlinebusinessliftoff.com/newsletter to sign up. That's onlinebusinessliftoff.com/newsletter. And thanks for listening, and I'll catch you in the next episode.